Hello, everybody. Okay, so a bit of a disclaimer before we start. I made this video before the Gordon comic came out, so if there's some information here that conflicts with that, um, that was because, one, I was too lazy to change all this, and second of all, I'm uploading this in this state to essentially give you an idea as to, like, what my thoughts are when a certain thing drops. So, with that in mind, welcome to the video now. It's finally here. After 1,256 days, a new Angry Birds game has finally been released. Angry Birds Bounce. And it's another Apple Arcade exclusive. But the good news is it's the only major negative I have with the game. It's actually kind of a decent game. But that's not why I clicked on this video. Unless it was. I think it was another review, in which case, I'm not mad if you leave. If your attention has a major dip at this point anyway, no. But for those of you who stayed, you're here because you have two questions on your mind in this game, and you need them answered. Those two questions being, one, how does this game fit in with the rest of the timeline? And two, who the heck is Gordon? Well, fear not, dear viewers, for I shall answer both of your questions in this video. Now, without further yapping, let's get into it. Alright, let's start with the timeline placement, since that's the easier one of the two for me to figure out. Alright, let's get a closer look at this here. Character roster, shut up. And, yep, that's Melody, and oh, that's Joe. Okay, so this takes place at least sometime after Angry Birds 2. And, oh, wait, that's Ruby. That's Screamer Draws Ruby. Okay. So I feel like that's pretty much direct confirmation this game takes place around Angry Birds' friends. Okay, but the King Pig in this game could be Leonard, and that could just ruin everything. So I have no idea. Oh, nope, the opening cutscene of the game just directly confirms Smooth Cheeks is the King Pig in this game. So that settles it. Yeah, let's just take place in the middle of Friends. Thanks for making my job easier, Rovio. Okay, well, let's get a bit more specific first. Here's how I think things might have gone down. Okay, so Red and Ruby meet for the first time in like a decade, and then King Pig sees this and goes, "Wait, why is there more birds? Birds aren't supposed to be more, whatever," which is weird considering he would need more birds if he wants to keep eating the eggs, but he was never meant to be smart, so I'm rolling with it. Anyway, in a fit of rage, and someone goes, "Is that petty?" He kicks the birds off the island in a half-baked plan to eat the eggs, a la the third act of Title Band, which I came up with first, Rovio. I think. I don't know how long this game was in development for. Either way, mine was posted first, so I deserve the royalty money, I think. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yeah. So during the Birds Made travels across the many islands of the world, they would eventually meet Gordon, and they would all be friends. Yay, okay, speaking of Gordon, we should probably talk about him now, shouldn't we? Okay. Alright. Well, I guess a good place to start would be his description in the game. Credit goes to the Angry Birds Facts Switch over for this one. Apparently his power is some kind of combination of Drillbird, the unused Howl look-like bird from Angry Birds Space, and Shockwave. But more importantly for this video, he is a bird of few words, but many tools. So that implies to me, at least, that he doesn't have an actual power, but it instead comes from whatever devices he has. Now, Rovio also released a fact sheet for him alongside all the other playable characters, which mostly just shares some of interest. He likes to be prepared, which does line up with the whole many tools thing we established earlier. What's the next two when things get interesting? For starters, he likes doing bushcraft, which basically just means surviving in the wilderness, so that could probably mean he was forced into the wild and had to survive on his own for a while. And then he likes talking about the North? Okay, first of all, why is it capitalized? That seems to imply it's a specific place rather than just the general north direction. And so, that begs the question, second of all, north of what? He was designed by Rovio's Toronto branch and is inspired by Canadian culture, so maybe it's some Canadian term I'm too American to understand? Maybe, but I have another possible idea. In a tweet that contained Gordon's bio, Red replied with more pieces of information about him. The biggest takeaway I have from all of these is that Gordon is old, very old, like around Mighty Eagle's age, apparently. Which is actually kind of huge, but real quick, before we move on, a little tangent about character design philosophy. You can skip this part if you want. I don't care, but I'm mostly here to complain that Gordon should not have two small black tail feathers. Okay, in the classic timeline at least, those exact feathers imply that character is very young in terms of age. They have Blues, Bubbles, Luca, and Silver, all very young birds canonically. They all have the same tail feathers as Gordon here. But Gordon, being as old as he is and having those tail feathers, by that logic, makes no sense. And it's not like he's just been around for a while and popping pigs just kept him looking young, as implied by the National Geographic Angry Birds Space. No. His voice clips in the game make him sound very old. So Gordon should not look like the way he does. At all. Okay, tangent over. Where was I? Oh, yeah. According to the Melody comic, at least the way I personally interpret it, there was an ancient society of birds that the pigs started a war with due to Melody's concerts, thus explaining why we never see them in later installments in the franchise. More accurately, especially Bounce. We're going all around the world, and somehow Gordon's just the only bird we find, so... I suspect that Gordon may have been one of these ancient birds that escaped out to the north after the war broke out. Presumably, probably out of not wanting to fight at all until he had to in the actual game. Okay, now hold on. Why does that sound familiar? A blue bird who escaped to the north in order to avoid a war between birds and pigs. It sounds a lot like Tony. I think Tony may have moved to Finland because he heard about the bird who survived in the north or something, and eventually found his way to the North Pole as well. Okay, now here's the really interesting part. According to one of Professor Pig's tidbits on the Unfit Ice episode, Santa Claus, at least in the Angry Birds universe, I've yet to confirm this in real life, lives in Finland. Now, for a long time, I assumed that Tony moved to Finland for safety since, well, who's less likely to be detected than Santa? Okay, but where am I going with all of this? Well, I think it's possible that Gordon may have found some way to get his tools from Santa Claus. Okay, maybe it's not actually that likely, but it does make some kind of sense when you think about it. Oh, by the way, I wasn't able to find a way to naturally transition into this, so I'm just going to leave it here before we get too far off topic. The official Angry Birds Gaming YouTube channel released the Angry Birds Bounce soundtrack on the day of release, with one of the tracks being called El Porcado. This obviously has a direct connection with the Bad Piggies episode of the same name, which according to that game's soundtrack takes place in South America, which is where Melody probably comes from based on our fact sheet. See how it all comes full circle? Isn't that neat? It only really makes me more confident in this theory, and that the entire world of Angry Birds is split into a ton of little islands, and not just one small area. Well, before the whole Gordon comic thing, but I'll make an entirely separate video on that. Anyway, with that in mind, all that's left for us to do now is to explain Gordon story-wise. So, here's what I think is Gordon's backstory, just based on the information we have in the game. Okay, so back in the day, there was this ancient society of birds that populated the world, and Gordon was one of them. Then one day, this Melody chick has a concert and subsequently starts a war between the two races. Gordon, being Canadian, was too polite and nice to fight in the war, so he decided to bail on his species and run to the north for safety. And there he learned to survive on his own and get crafty with tools and survival skills and stuff. Then, many years later, when war breaks out again, another bluebird heads north for safety after hearing about another who did the same, and is probably still alive. Anyway, eventually Tony would find Santa Claus and decide to crash with him until it all blows over. Then, even more years later, all the birds would be kicked off Piggy Island, and they would eventually meet Gordon in their travels, and they all became friends, and then when the block presumably returns, they never think about or mention Gordon ever again, for some reason. And there you have it. Angry Birds Bounce takes place towards the very end of the timeline, and Gordon is another ancient bird who dipped and had to survive on his own. So yeah, I told you all your questions would be answered, at least prior to the comic releasing. Like I said, I'm going to do an entirely separate video on that. And just another possible reinterpretation of the Angry Birds timeline in general. It's going to be a big video, my next Angry Birds video, so look out for that. So, yeah, again, just a little glimpse into my thoughts of things before the comic dropped, to see where my mind was and what I think about when theorizing about this game franchise. So, what do you think? Am I right? Am I wrong? Well, I am wrong, but is my way of thinking wrong, I guess would be a better thing to ask. Am I just completely insane? Please, let me know in the comments. And if you liked it, then you know what to do. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!